Hello. Special thanks to Own a Saber for sponsoring our 90,000 subscriber lightsaber giveaway. All the details in a pinned comment down below. Our story begins inside the Jedi Temple. The Jedi had just returned from Qui-Gon's funeral on Naboo. Obi-Wan told Yoda that he refused to allow Skywalker to be thrown out of the Jedi Order. He made a promise to Qui-Gon. He was going to keep it. Yoda and the collective Jedi Council disagreed with allowing Anakin into the Jedi Order. Anakin was not to be trained as a Jedi. Obi-Wan was brought to the Council chambers when they returned to Coruscant. At this point, Obi-Wan was under the hope that the Council would change their mind and allow it. On Naboo, Obi-Wan was told by Yoda that the Council would consider it and put it to a vote. They, again, decided that Anakin shouldn't be allowed to join the Jedi Order. While Skywalker wasn't inside the Council chambers with Obi-Wan, he would be shocked to learn of the news. Obi-Wan stood in the Council chambers, surrounded by the wisest minds of the Jedi Order, and he couldn't do anything. His feet were swept out from under him. What could he do? Break his promise to Qui-Gon and allow Anakin to go back to Tatooine to become a slave? If Obi-Wan broke his promise, he wouldn't be fulfilling his mandate to Qui-Gon. But if he didn't, then what would happen to him? He would be kicked out of the Jedi Order, and he'd be on the streets with the kid. Kenobi bowed to the Council members and walked out of the Council chambers. His initial confusion ate away at him. He didn't know how to process what he was feeling. He stumbled to the elevator doors and stepped into them. Obi-Wan Kenobi. He said his name to himself, repeating the final words Qui-Gon said to him before he died. Obi-Wan couldn't help but feel like his master handed him the short end of the stick. What was he supposed to do with the information? Anakin was some chosen one, and he was a 25-year-old with no prior experience training anyone. What was he supposed to do, let alone training a student who had never been a Jedi? Or, wait, could he even teach him as a Jedi? All of his thoughts were disorderly, and strewn about with no real direction. He stood in the elevator as it slowly descended into the body of the temple. His heart sank the lower the elevator got, and when the doors opened, he almost burst into tears. He loved the Order with all of who he was, because it was everything he was. He struggled so much as a boy to be able to make it to this point, and now he's about to throw it all away for some boy that Qui-Gon wanted him to take care of in the afterlife. Obi-Wan looked down the hallway and saw the boy sitting on the floor next to a pillar. He was picking at his fingernails, still removing sand from them. Anakin didn't seem to notice anything going on around him, and he didn't pick up on Obi-Wan leaving the elevator. Obi-Wan thought for a moment. He nearly turned around and walked away, and just pretended that Anakin wasn't there. But that wasn't who he was. He was a Jedi Knight. He was Jedi Knight Obi-Wan Kenobi. He was better than that, wasn't he? Kenobi took a deep breath and stepped forward. That lasted for a short moment. As he took a step forward, Jocasta Nu came around the corner and called out his name. Obi-Wan turned over and looked at her. She held in her hand a small box and told Obi-Wan that it was from Qui-Gon's room. It was some of his personal items. He could have them if he wanted, or he could let them be burnt if he wanted. While Qui-Gon wasn't given a proper burial in Coruscant, her gesture was meant to bring some sense of peace to Obi-Wan. She didn't have any malevolent intentions with her words. She was just trying to sow peace. Obi-Wan looked at the small box. It was beautiful, a golden brown wooden box that could fit in the palm of his hand. Obi-Wan reached out and grabbed it from her hand and thanked her. The world fell into slow motion around him. Then he turned around to hear his name being called, though it was being called as Mr. Obi-Wan. Kenobi turned back and looked at the boy running towards him. There was an excitement across his face as he asked Obi-Wan if he was being brought into the Jedi Order. Obi-Wan took a deep breath and looked down at Anakin, shook his head. Anakin's joy faded and he looked up with confusion and sadness. He asked what would happen to him now. Obi-Wan told Anakin that he fought from inside the council chambers. He paused. The decision sat on the tip of his tongue. His chest swelled and his heartbeat stopped for a moment. What should he do? Obi-Wan tightened his throat and squeezed out an answer. He told Anakin that he would continue to fight for him. Anakin looked up, and Obi-Wan put his hand on Anakin's shoulder. He smiled and pushed Anakin along. What had he done? His heartbeat started again, and his breathing resumed. What did he just do? Obi-Wan walked with a shake in his hands, holding the last of Qui-Gon, and walking away from everything he loved. As they got closer to the edge of the temple, Obi-Wan stopped and looked back at it all. Anakin looked up at Obi-Wan and realized how large of a sacrifice this was for him, and he told Obi-Wan that he didn't have to do it. Kenobi heard this from behind him, and as he wiped a tear away from his eye, he cleared his throat and turned around, telling Anakin that this would be the right decision. At the moment, he wasn't sure of that, but he hoped it was. The two of them grabbed a cab and took it to a local ship dealer, and Kenobi used his Jedi-issued Republic credits to get himself a ship. It wasn't anything pretty, but it was enough to get from point A to point B. Anakin asked where they were going, and Obi-Wan told him that they were going to leave Coruscant. Anakin's inquisitive nature was becoming a bit stressful for Obi-Wan, as was dealing with this massive change and trying to hold himself together while undertaking a barrage of questions. Obi-Wan was known for his patience, so he kept himself together and quietly answered the questions while sorting out the whole deal with the ship. He also decided it'd be best to get them some new outfits so they didn't have to buy the trash they had on Tatooine. Maybe it was an elitist mindset, but Obi-Wan was going from the pinnacle of society to the dump of the galaxy, all for a boy he didn't really know. They bought some clothes, and Anakin was able to get some outfits that fit him better, that weren't mangled with sand. Kenobi then took them into the vessel and they departed back to Tatooine. During the trip, Anakin slept on the seats of the ship. It was a tiring trip, from Tatooine to Coruscant to Naboo, back to Coruscant, and then going back to Tatooine, which Anakin was unaware of where they were going at the moment. Obi-Wan was going to tell Anakin, but he fell asleep, asking himself questions about a number of things that Kenobi couldn't keep track of. As the ship traveled through hyperspace, Obi-Wan felt a deep-seated resentment. He couldn't just get over it. Why would he make that decision? It felt so against himself, but what could he do now? He couldn't just throw Anakin away, especially not after making that promise to Qui-Gon. Had he not made that promise, maybe it would have been easier. Even Obi-Wan second doubted that thought. He knew it wouldn't have been easy to do it. His exhaustion only made him even more resentful and even more spiteful. The way Obi-Wan saw it was like this. As a youngling, he was the weakest of his class. He was so far behind and he was almost kicked out of the Order. He barely became a Padawan and he had to train with Qui-Gon. Which Qui-Gon was a great teacher in his opinion, it was just a bit stressful with a master who actively defied the Order. He then lost said master and threw away his life after having killed the first Sith seen in millennia. Obi-Wan sat on the other side of the ship, suppressing his emotions and not coming to terms with the life he chose for himself. When they eventually did arrive on Tatooine, Obi-Wan landed the ship in a landing bay, and as Anakin woke up, the two of them left the ship. Obi-Wan knew that for now, that this was the last time they'd be flying. According to Qui-Gon, Republic credits did not work out here, so inside the landing bay, he sold the ship. He got a lot of credits for it because it was essentially brand new by Tatooine standards. In the core, it was a rust bucket, but out here, that would be extremely profitable. It just went to show the difference between the two sections of the galaxy. Obi-Wan took all the credits he earned from the selling of the vessel and took Anakin with him. Obi-Wan didn't know his way around, so Anakin had to show him around. They eventually got to Shmi's home and she wasn't there at the moment, but Anakin was able to let himself in. While they were inside, Obi-Wan asked Anakin for the whereabouts of Watto's shop. Anakin told him he could take him there, but Obi-Wan denied. A good portion of this was due to just wanting to be alone for some time. He didn't want to be around Anakin because he could be a bit much to deal with, plus his feelings on the matter anyways. Obi-Wan was giving the directions and he left Anakin alone. Inside of Shmi's home, Anakin walked over to 3PO and powered him on. Shmi had begun putting plating around his circuits. Nothing much, just a chess piece. 3PO was excited to see Anakin and began talking to him about everything. What had only been about a day, it seemed as if so much had changed. Obi-Wan eventually found himself at Watto's shop and he did what he had to do, which involved him simply buying Shmi from Watto. With Anakin's departure, Shmi was picking up the slack, and Watto wasn't cheap with it either. The cheeky Toydarian forced Obi-Wan to spend a lot of credits, but Kenobi knew how to deal with a fool like this before he got there. He made sure that the way he negotiated with him made it seem like he didn't have much to offer, and he was buying her for his moisture farm out past the Dune Seas. Watto just kind of assumed she would die on the way there, so it didn't really matter to him. He made some credits off of it, which he thought was most of Obi-Wan's stash, and then Kenobi took Shmi away from the shop. Without his Jedi robes, there was no reason to believe Obi-Wan Kenobi was a Jedi, so she just assumed that he was out of his mind. It was kind of a weird thing seeing a man who she never met come up and buy her without ever talking to her. It was especially weird because he was very clearly young, but Obi-Wan, once they left the shop, explained everything to her and how he was here with Anakin Skywalker. She was shocked, surprised, and then saddened in her own way. Of course she was happy that her son came back, but she feared for him. She worried about him potentially being upset or holding resentment against someone for not being allowed into the Order. She also wondered about a number of things, such as Qui-Gon Jinn and who Obi-Wan actually was. A lot of it was filled in before they returned to her home. Shmi also told him that she didn't have the credits to own the home, so they would likely have to move. This, of course, was after she told Obi-Wan that he could stay with her and Anakin for as long as he needed. In her own way, she adopted him into her small family, because he did the selfless thing for her, which for a Jedi should be expected, but he definitely didn't have to do it. Obi-Wan did appreciate the warmth he received from her, but there was still an uncertainty within him. His resentment for Anakin continued to build up. This planet was really a dust ball and he couldn't really stand the heat, but it's not like Obi-Wan could rant about it to Shmi. That wouldn't be kind or nice. Regardless, Obi-Wan told Shmi that he would pay for the home so it would just not be taken from her. She couldn't believe this kindness and she was very appreciative for it. When the two of them returned to the home, Shmi was very excited to see her son again and wrapped him up in a large hug. She wanted the best for her son, but he wasn't a slave, and while he wasn't a Jedi, it was better than being a slave. When the mother and son reunited, Obi-Wan seemingly vanished. It was a long day and he hadn't slept since before Naboo. He was running on pure pain and he knew it. Kenobi walked through the streets of this awful city. The suns began to set and the heat vanished from beneath his feet as it retreated without the suns high in the sky. He walked to the edge of the city and sat down on a small wall. He looked out across the seas of sand and questioned himself. He wondered why he did this and what he had done to himself. He couldn't go anywhere. He was stranded, and the feeling forced him into a helpless state of confusion. Why'd he do it? Why'd he have to be so nice to a kid he didn't even know? Obi-Wan reached out for Qui-Gon, just wishing he'd still be alive. He knew it wasn't possible, but he just hoped that it could be. He said Qui-Gon's name under his breath and asked for his guidance. He wished for protection on his journey. For a moment, it felt like Qui-Gon was there with him. But in a typical Qui-Gon fashion, he didn't say anything and just looked on in a way that said, "Come on, you have a lot of work to do." It was very Qui-Gon, and despite Obi-Wan still sitting by himself, his imagination brought him a sense of peace. Kenobi didn't know, of course, but his master was actually there. He was the first Jedi to ever transcend into the living Force and become a Force ghost. Though he didn't make himself visible, he just made himself felt. Qui-Gon was looking at Obi-Wan because he knew his student would better himself. Kenobi sat on the small ledge and wept. For the first time in probably his entire life, he let out all of his emotions and they rolled off of him. Sure, he cried when Qui-Gon died, but it was nothing like this. The sense of solitude he felt made him feel like he was in exile. It wasn't a pleasant feeling, and he couldn't be more vulnerable and alone. While he sat there for what felt like hours, a hand laid itself on his shoulder. Obi-Wan thought it was a thug and reached for his lightsaber, but a soft voice crawled over his back, and he turned to see Shmi. She asked if he was okay, saying that it wasn't safe to be out here alone. Obi-Wan turned to her with a tilted expression. Why was she out here if it wasn't safe? Shmi asked him what was the matter. He looked at her, and he didn't want to say it, so she said it for him. She asked if he was resentful or even spiteful of Anakin. Obi-Wan looked at her with a profound sadness in his eyes. She said she understood. Shmi admitted that for a time in her life, she did too. According to his master, the Force gifted her a child, and for the first few months, she forced herself not to love him. Of course, that washed away as she did love her son, but she didn't ask for him, and she didn't want the situation to unfold on her. Several times she thought about putting Anakin on a space cruiser and hoping he ended up anywhere else in the galaxy. She couldn't help but hate that he had to be raised into slavery here on Tatooine. Obi-Wan asked her what changed. She said that her perspective did. It was no longer a burden, but a gift. It was no longer another mouth to feed, but a person to love. That's how she saw it, and while it'd be much different for him, especially now that he was here on Tatooine, she would do what she could to make it as easy for him as possible. Shmi sat down on the ledge next to Obi-Wan and told him that everything would be alright. She put her hand on his back and gently rubbed it, telling him that it would all be alright. It broke Obi-Wan, straight down to the heart it broke him. All of his anger, resentment, fear, and distaste shattered at a moment's notice, and he wept. Shmi held him, and then when they were done, they walked back to her home. Of course, nothing is ever easy. They were attacked by a group of thugs, and Obi-Wan quickly did what he could to dispatch them. Over the coming days, Obi-Wan would shift his perspective of the situation. He did a lot of meditation. While Shmi's home wasn't big, there was a spare bedroom next to hers. When it was called a bedroom, it really wasn't. It was just a small hall with a little less than Obi-Wan's wingspan wide. It was tight, but it was similar to his home inside the temple. Kenobi would meditate here for days. Anakin at this point figured that Obi-Wan hated him and he tried to avoid getting in Obi-Wan's way, afraid that Kenobi might lash out or anything. This wasn't because of who Obi-Wan was, it was just a fear response to being a slave to Watto for so long. Obi-Wan would never lash out at Anakin, and as Shmi adjusted to her new life without being a slave, she went out to get a job, while Anakin met up with his friends and continued to do kid things. Obi-Wan still thought about running away, but one day it clicked. One day he believed and realized that he could still train Anakin. It would just be different. He could build up Anakin without a structure that would have been seen inside the Order, and essentially train him the way that Qui-Gon would have. It would be the best way to honor his master and fulfill his promise to him. It brought Obi-Wan a sense of peace, and when he came to this realization, he was excited to announce it to Anakin. He of course still had to wait for Skywalker to come back from playing with his friends and stuff. But once Skywalker did come back, he learned that Obi-Wan was going to train him to be a Jedi. Well, not quite a Jedi, but a wielder of the Force. Before Anakin got excited, he stopped and asked Obi-Wan if this is what he wanted or if he was being forced to. Obi-Wan looked at Anakin and then got down to his level. He put his hands on Anakin's shoulders and smiled. He told him that this was his choice. He directed his head towards the door and stood up, telling Anakin to come with him. Anakin nodded his head and walked to the balcony. Obi-Wan asked Anakin if he could pick him up, and he nodded. Obi-Wan lifted Anakin up to the ledge and told him to sit, so Anakin did. He asked Anakin if he knew what the Force was, and he shook his head. It didn't really click all that much when Qui-Gon said it. Obi-Wan smiled and told him that the Force is what binds the galaxy together. It's the life force that exists within every living being. As Anakin looked at Obi-Wan, his master transcended reality. He no longer felt mortal, he seemed like a god of sorts, one that was bestowing such great knowledge upon him. Obi-Wan walked around the other side of Anakin, told him to feel. Anakin asked how. Obi-Wan took Anakin's hand and placed it on the wall. It wasn't much like a mountain on Coruscant or a mountain on Ahch-To, but it would suffice. Kenobi pressed Anakin's hand down gently and told Skywalker to reach out from within, to trust himself and feel through the Force. He then asked, what did he feel? Anakin felt life and death, the light and the dark, and at the center of all that, a balance that resided right within his own chest. Obi-Wan smiled at Anakin and told him that was the Force. Skywalker smiled with so much joy. Obi-Wan told Anakin that he would experience a lot of lessons from here on out, but they would take time. Obi-Wan wasn't an instructor, so things might get difficult. Anakin suggested that they had no issues with difficulty. As long as they worked with each other, then they would be fine. Anakin trusted Obi-Wan. Over the next several weeks to months, Anakin would learn how to move objects with the Force. He would understand Obi-Wan's morality and how it coincided with the Jedi teachings. They would spend time in meditation and seek to help others, doing things that Jedi typically would do. For the first time in his life, Obi-Wan also got a job, because while the home was paid off, there was food that needed to be put on the table, and Obi-Wan didn't want Shmi to do all the work. It helped a lot, and Shmi even began to regard Obi-Wan as her second son. There was a real relationship that formed between the two of them, and for someone like Obi-Wan who never really remembered his mother, it was something special, though part of him began thinking about discovering his roots and going back to his homeworld, wherever that may be. But not for nothing, he enjoyed his little family here on Tatooine. With Anakin expanding his mind and his heart through the Force, he could feel something calling out to him, and so Anakin and Obi-Wan journeyed out into the desert. Of course, they had rations to be taken care of. Shmi wasn't fond of it, but Anakin felt a ringing in his ear. While it was uncommon for kyber crystals to be in random locations around the galaxy, it was possible that Skywalker locked onto one. They would travel for 2 days, and when they eventually got to the Junyan Canyons, they could see a couple of homesteads out in the sands from the location. But they continued forward. Obi-Wan told Anakin to take point, and he did. Turns out while they were out, Padme Amidala came to Tatooine to free Shmi Skywalker from slavery, but she was nowhere to be seen. She had to assume the worst and hope that her little friend Anakin was doing well inside the Jedi Order. In the Junyan Canyons, Skywalker started running. Obi-Wan was keeping his eyes peeled for any Tusken Raiders, considering they liked to frequent these areas and tear anyone apart that came across them. The ringing intensified for Anakin, and his little legs carried him faster and faster until he slipped. Obi-Wan saw Anakin slip and he chased after him, though trouble awaited. This was odd. It seemed like the Tusken Raiders had attacked a caravan of people. They were all slaughtered, and Obi-Wan quickly ignited his lightsaber, running forward and jumping over Anakin. For the first time Anakin saw his master in action. Kenobi moved with true skill and dedication. His intentions were pure, and he didn't want to kill any of them if he didn't have to. It was the Jedi within him coming out. Anakin ran over to cover to watch, and then when he ran over to cover, he was scared by a little girl the same age as him. She had been told to run for cover when the Tuskens attacked. Chances are she would have been killed off if Obi-Wan wasn't here. Kenobi continued his work, blocking Tusken shots and even killing a couple of them in the process. Kenobi turned around and watched them flee the location. They were crying out, which to Obi-Wan signified that they were back in greater numbers. Fear washed over Kenobi's face as he realized he lost sight of Skywalker. He called out Anakin's name, and he popped up from behind a rock. Obi-Wan sighed and ran over. He saw the little girl. She was the same age as Anakin, and she refused to look over the rock to see what happened to her family. Anakin still heard the ringing, and he asked for Obi-Wan's lightsaber. Kenobi got down on his knees and nodded his head, handing it to Anakin before asking the little girl if she was okay. She nodded her head, and he told her to come out. She'd be alright. Obi-Wan turned to hear Skywalker igniting the lightsaber and cutting into a wall. Okay, he must have found something. Kenobi turned back and took the girl's hand, asking her for her name. She told him that her name was Zena Pax. He asked her what they were doing out here. She expressed that they were a group of traveling musicians. It was their family's thing. They had always done that, and they were going to Jabba's palace. She started crying. She said that Jabba would have her killed if she didn't show up. Obi-Wan shook his head and told her that it would be alright, and he told her that he would take her back to their home if that was alright with her. He didn't want to take her if she didn't want to go, but she nodded her head and put her hand into his. Obi-Wan turned and waved Skywalker over. Anakin called Obi-Wan's name and showed him the shiny new crystal he had. Obi-Wan congratulated him on his first step into a larger world, and then he told him that they needed to go. He would show him how to utilize it when they got back home. When they eventually returned after another 2 days, Zena was wiped out. She was given Obi-Wan's room, and he told the family that he would sleep in the living room. It wasn't that big of a deal for him. Zena would tell stories about her life with her family and find home with the Skywalkers inside their small abode. It did get a bit stressful, it was one more mouth to feed, but it was alright because everyone was safe. Jabba found that her family had been killed by the Tusken Raiders and didn't even know she existed, so, in reality, it didn't matter to him. Skywalker would eventually be shown how to construct a lightsaber. It wasn't pretty by any means, but it worked. Zena was filled in on the whole situation, and she found such an interest in their dynamic. For the next couple years, everything would be great on Tatooine for the small family of 4. Though Obi Wan was beginning to feel a lot of longing that he hadn't felt in years. He remembered someone. Well, he had secretly thought of this someone every night since he left the Order, which was part of his early resentment he had towards Skywalker. Instead of being on Tatooine, they could have been on Mandalore. Obi-Wan eventually let it go, but it didn't deter him from thinking about her, the woman of his dreams. He once said that he could never be with a politician, but he couldn't in reality be with anyone that wasn't her. Anakin's training was going really well, and he was spending every day with people he loved. It was a key influence for him as a Force wielder, or as Obi-Wan liked to call him, a Boken Jedi. Skywalker was beyond that of what even the Jedi believed he could become. A majority of Anakin's success was due to his teacher. Obi-Wan was a terrific teacher, and once he stopped overthinking the whole teaching thing, he was able to settle in. Something that really aided Obi-Wan was having Shmi, and then when Zena arrived, Zena around Skywalker. All 3 people in his immediate life brought him so much happiness, mostly because he was allowed to enjoy being around them. Obi-Wan didn't prohibit Anakin from doing anything. He just taught him to resist the pull of the dark side. As a Boken Jedi, Anakin really began to rival the skills of fully fledged Jedi Masters. At the same time, his lightsaber skills weren't exactly there. This was because there wasn't a ton of places to practice lightsaber combat at. Anakin, once he was old enough, was able to go out and get a job. He worked in mechanics with Zena inside of a small shop on the far side of Mos Espa. The reason lightsaber practice was hard is because once people on the streets knew they had lightsabers, they became targets. To own a lightsaber was a huge deal to people in the Outer Rim, and to sell one was even bigger of a deal. Lightsabers were rare to come by, and typically mob bosses, especially out here on Tatooine, like to have them. They could say they killed a lightsaber wielder or whatever, and it would make them look scarier and more powerful in people's eyes. So when Skywalker and Kenobi practiced with their lightsabers in the Junlin Canyons, Zena got to go with them from time to time, and she would use Anakin as target practice for her shooting abilities, which she loved. Anakin, he wasn't fond of it, because she was aggressive. Speaking of aggression, Anakin wasn't the most aggressive person in the galaxy. With Obi-Wan teaching him and his mother overseeing a lot of his early training, Anakin's little bit of anger wasn't allowed to foster and grow into something so large. They were able to confront the issue head-on and stop it before it got anywhere, same with Anakin's ego. Other things that helped this were being at home, Shmi being free from slavery, having a best friend like Zena, and of course an amazing teacher like Obi-Wan. Skywalker's ability to wield the Force was impressive. Not that Obi-Wan believed Anakin was anywhere close to Master Yoda's level yet, but Skywalker clearly had refined his skills rather than branched out too far. With someone like Anakin who had an extremely high midichlorian count, it could be extremely easy to use all those midichlorians without refining them. Because Anakin spent a lot of time practicing, focusing, and trusting the process, he was able to fully develop himself. He wasn't just a broad range of abilities, he was one centered, concentrated effort, and with such refining, he was extremely powerful. Though he still had much to learn. Also, when Anakin and Zena were 13, she asked Obi-Wan if he could train her as well. He told her before time and time again that she didn't have the same talents as Anakin, which wasn't a knock or taken as such, but Anakin was the chosen one for a reason. Zena had midichlorians, after all, everyone did, but she didn't have enough to be allowed into the Jedi Order. Obi-Wan, though, did agree to train her, but she would get frustrated a lot, especially when her best friend had so much more potential than she. But she persisted, and was able to lift small objects and feel things more than she had before. It added to her experience in life, rather than take away from it. Obi-Wan at this point had saved up enough credits to buy a ship. He wasn't sure if he wanted to do it. While Anakin and Zena were both 19 years old, and were free to do whatever they wanted, as if they weren't already free to do so, Obi-Wan didn't want anyone to feel like he was abandoning them. When dinner time came around, he told everyone about his feelings and his thoughts about trying to find the Duchess of Mandalore. He told them that he didn't want them to feel like he was leaving them or anything, he just wanted so badly to find her. Firstly, Zena squealed because she thought it was so cute that Obi-Wan finally was going out to find her. Zena loved to pry at Obi-Wan all the time to see if he would go out on dates with women or go out and see people, but he always said no. One day she asked and he told her about Satine, which she thought was really adorable, but Obi-Wan never mentioned how badly he missed her. His focus was always on Anakin's training or bettering him into adulthood. Zena popped up and told Obi-Wan that she was so supportive of it, and if he wanted company, she would totally come along. He smiled and looked at the other two. Shmi was excited about it. While there obviously had been conversations about it in the past, she didn't push the subject because she figured if Obi-Wan wanted to say anything about it, then he'd say it. That's how their dynamic worked. Anakin, on the other hand, was completely in the dark about this, and so when Zena nearly popped his eardrums, he finally caught a whiff of the tea. He looked up and told him that he would love to go along if Obi-Wan wanted. Obi-Wan was actually so surprised they embraced it. Not that he was given any reason to believe that they wouldn't, just a little of that, breaking the news anxiety got to him. Anakin told him that he could help pick out a ship for him tomorrow. Obi-Wan quite liked the idea and he welcomed it. Shmi was super excited, but she didn't feel the need to go to Mandalore. She just wished them well on their journey, and told them that she would lock down the fort or just stay at home. It would be good for all of them, and in the morning, Zena jumped Obi-Wan by splashing water in his face. It was ice-cold water too, and he wasn't exactly fond of it, but her excitement radiated off of her, and his frustration turned into excitement too. He could see Satine again. Hopefully, nothing would be wrong with the visit. Obi-Wan, Zena, and Anakin walked to the local ship port, and they bought a small vessel that would carry them to Mandalore. Hopefully, in one piece. But it was the best ship on the market, apparently. Obi-Wan then decided that he would try something. It's not like the Mandalorians would just allow a citizen from Tatooine to waltz into the throne room to see the Duchess, so he threw some Jedi robes on, and good thing for him, they still fit. Obi-Wan already wore Jedi-esque robes, or Boken Jedi robes, but they weren't just Jedi robes. They were just elements that fit with them and such. As they got the trio into the ship, they prepared and departed from Mandalore. Once in hyperspace, Kenobi would continue Anakin's training. By this point, Anakin was questioning when his training would be finished, which Obi-Wan told him that one was never too old to learn. Obi-Wan, of course, didn't have Jedi texts or anything of the sort, but he was sure there were things that he could discover with Anakin together. Zena, on the other hand, was just happy she could lift a cup with the Force because reaching for something is overrated. On the other side of the Outer Rim, war was beginning. The Clone Wars jumped into full throttle with the Battle of Geonosis. Things went a little differently without Skywalker in the picture, but all that mattered to Sidious was the war beginning. The tragedy for Sidious was his inability to find Skywalker for the last 10 years. He and Dooku had been searching rigorously for Skywalker. This was mostly due to Palpatine's belief that Skywalker had been kicked from the Jedi Order. So, when they went to Tatooine, there wasn't a sign of them. The tragedy is, they missed Skywalker during the same period of time that Senator Amidala did. Also, on another note, Dooku was able to have Senator Amidala killed, with the Jedi being bombed in the process. It was a shame, but she'd make the delegation of 2,000 stronger. Without her in the picture, the resistance to Palpatine in the Senate was fragile. Dooku had scouts looking for Skywalker, but the truth was, he was undermining Palpatine. He didn't want Skywalker involved in anything. Dooku believed that being such a powerful force would only hold them back, not help them forward. The Jedi had also searched for Skywalker, but nothing ever came of it. About 4 years after Kenobi left, they decided that maybe they were wrong. This was mostly due to Yaddle's disappearance and then confirmed death. When the Jedi learned of Dooku's stance in the galaxy as Count of Sereno, they began their search. Nothing came of it, and their main hope was that Skywalker wouldn't become a political adversary to the Republic. The trip through hyperspace came to an end, and after a short journey, Skywalker and Zena were getting really good at partnered meditation. It was something Obi-Wan figured out by accident, and he taught it to them. What it was an ability for Skywalker to use his knowledge and skills to assist Zena through a meditation. It reflected how a dyad would work in the Force. But being that Zena wasn't strong enough or fluent enough in the Force to be a member of a dyad, it didn't fit. Also, dyads were incredibly rare, and so it didn't really matter per se. This joint or partnered meditation helped Zena with understanding so much more about the Force and herself. At the same time, it tightened her bond with Anakin on a deeper level. They both understood each other from a mental, emotional, and spiritual sense, one that only maybe Obi-Wan understood about both of them combined. The landing procedure on Sundari was a bit rocky, but it was alright because they got to the ground and everything was alright. That's all anyone could ask for. Obi-Wan left the vessel, wearing his Jedi robes. He told the guard that he was a representative from the Jedi Order, and his name was Obi-Wan-Kenobi, and he wished to speak with the Duchess. Both Zena and Anakin turned to each other. Obi-Wan was so professional, they'd never seen him talk like a diplomat before. But it was only 25 years of life resurfacing. Also, nerves. Okay, a lot of it was nerves. They were told to wait, and moments later a small skiff would pull up and take them to the palace in Sundari. The Duchess was eagerly awaiting for their arrival. Obi-Wan was noticeably nervous the entire way there, and Zena kept poking fun at him for it, which didn't do anything but ease his nerves. As they arrived at the palace, Obi-Wan noted how different it looked. She obviously had done some remodeling, which he thought looked nice, though nothing was as perfect as the moment he saw her again. Both Anakin and Zena saw the hesitation in his first step. He was able to fully feel his emotions for 10 years, and for 10 years he became more and more like a regular person, allowing his emotions to be vibrant and sit right at the forefront of his person. No one else existed in the moment they locked eyes. Though Satine believed Obi-Wan was here to bring Mandalore into the Republic, which was the furthest thing from what he was trying to do. Zena nudged Anakin about 15 times. She was so obsessed with this, and she couldn't help but enjoy it as well. Obi-Wan walked before the throne, and he told her that he wasn't here on official Jedi business. Satine's demeanor changed. She looked at him and realized that there was something different. Sure, the facial hair, but that wasn't it. There was something unique about him. Obi-Wan told her what it was before she could pinpoint it. He told her that he left the Jedi Order. She was taken aback, then she looked at the two kids. He didn't have children, did he? No, that's impossible. Of course they weren't his children, but a number of thoughts ran through her mind as he said that. He told her that he wished he came sooner, because he hadn't been a Jedi for years. Satine asked Obi-Wan to escort her on a walk. Obi-Wan was so quick to do so. Anakin and Zena were given permission to freely walk the palace, well, the locations that weren't restricted. The two of them found themselves in the dining hall, which was usually occupied by Satine alone, but they pretended they were royalty while Obi-Wan and Satine caught up. Zena told Anakin that she could feel something different about Obi-Wan, and Anakin closed his eyes with a shining smile, glimmering from cheek to cheek. He spoke quietly and told her that Obi-Wan found his home. It was peace. Zena looked at Anakin as he opened his eyes and she smiled. They both knew that there was just a single piece missing from that puzzle for Obi-Wan for so long, and it seemed that he'd finally found it. He was missing his soulmate, his twin flame, his star-crossed lover. She was always there, and now he was finally here. Anakin asked Zena if she thought that Obi-Wan would ever come back with them. She shook her head. She told him that perhaps Obi-Wan would bring them here. Anakin thought for a moment. That was entirely possible. Anakin didn't want to impose on them, but perhaps he would simply invite them. Zena jumped up. She had a sparkle in her eye, and she took Anakin's hand and told him to come along with her. She always wanted to be a princess, and she nearly pulled his arm out of his socket. In the gardens on the outside of the palace, Obi-Wan and Satine were reacquainting themselves with each other. He told her about Anakin and Zena and everything that happened in the years since they last spoke. Satine also told Obi-Wan about her life and how it had changed since he was last here. Their catch-up was beautiful and it didn't get interrupted. As the night began to descend on Sundari, she told Obi-Wan that she would like to have him, Anakin, and Zena for dinner. He accepted the offer with joy and she took his hand and led him back towards the palace. The night was perfect as anyone could have ever imagined, and it only got better the further it went along. Because at a certain point, Satine was getting impatient and she dragged Obi-Wan away from the kids. She brought him over to a window and they looked out at Sundari. It was beautiful. Zena and Anakin weren't far behind, both of them peeking around the corner to see what was happening. Satine told Obi-Wan that she didn't want them to remain apart. She felt confident when she pulled him away, but in the moment they were both uneasy. All their time apart culminated into one evening of beauty and they dare not let it slip away. Satine said that if he would like, she would love him to stay here. She added on a quick with her underneath her breath, and he told her that he dreamed of this moment for his entire life. The two of them embraced each other. Satine told Obi-Wan that if he wanted, he could bring his family here as well. The palace was large enough for all of them. What was his family was hers as well, as long as that was all right with him. He smiled and thanked her, telling her that his family was always hers. The two of them heard the snickering of the two kids and turned to see them, watching. Zena jumped out and pushed Anakin back, laughing with a joyous expression on her face. Finally, she exclaimed. Satine looked at Obi-Wan and then to her, and asked with a smile that they weren't related, were they? Obi-Wan just smiled and told her that he just has that effect on people. In the following days, Satine would have Shmi, Anakin, and Zena moved into the royal palace of Sundari, officially and not officially becoming a part of the royal family. They were able to get rid of their Tatooine attire and trade it in for something with a little bit more comfort and style and no sand. During this time, news broke of the Republic at war with the CIS, and Obi-Wan expressed his lack of interest in the war. Was it selfish? No. He was one man, and he couldn't be responsible for a war that the CIS and Republic were a part of. As the war progressed, there would be trouble on Mandalore, but with Skywalker, Kenobi, and Pax present, the threats weren't really that real. Anakin and Obi-Wan went on a mission to Concordia to see if they could find out anything regarding the Death Watch. What they found surprised them, but as a duo, they were unstoppable. Pre Vizsla did challenge the duo, and he faced the wrath of a fully developed Anakin Skywalker. His prowess with the blade was impressive, and no matter how much Vizsla did, he would have never been a match, especially against the Force. Though once the fight was over, the Mandalorians began to kneel before the apparent ruler of Mandalore. Skywalker did the unthinkable. He was brash, so Anakin was kind of weirded out by the entire reaction from the Mandalorians. Truthfully, he was pissed at them, because they tried to kill him and Obi-Wan, and now they wanted to be buddies? No. Anakin destroyed the darksaber and told them to stop being so childish. Obi-Wan was proud of his student. Anakin had come a long way, though the Mandalorians were not overly fond of this as they prepared to rain down hell on Skywalker. Once the darksaber was destroyed, the Mandalorians went feral, some of them against each other, a majority of them against the Boken Jedi. Obi-Wan and Anakin used this trick a couple of times against thugs on Mos Espa, and they used the Force to block every shot that came their way here. The shots were then thrown back at the Mandalorians. The few who didn't die were chased down by Anakin and Obi-Wan. Without the Jedi Code holding them back, their directive was to protect Mandalore, a planet they called home, and so that's what they did. Not all the Mandalorians died, and as they retreated, more issues began to arise within their ranks. But it didn't really matter because it was all done and over with. The Darksaber was gone. Bo-Katan and Gar Saxon got into it, and they started a miniature civil war with each other that ended up destroying both of them. Of course, for Satine, it was awful to learn that her sister had died, but it was a fate that was bound to beset her. Obi-Wan at this point believed that Anakin's training was done, but Skywalker reminded his master that no one was ever too old to learn. The bond between master and apprentice went further than teachings of the Force. They were brothers, or maybe even father and son, as close as anyone could be to each other, really. Obi-Wan and Anakin believed that there were more mysteries about the Force, and so that's what they began searching for. What else could they learn about? Turns out there was so much more, and they found their answers on a journey to Atalon. There were ancient texts about it, and it led the two of them to the planet where Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Zena learned about the Great Bendu. He welcomed them with open arms, and he noted that Zena had much to learn about the Force. Skywalker and Kenobi had something else, a mission to confront fear, which had them going into the caves by themselves to confront massive spiders. Though, as Bendu understood, their mission had nothing to do with the spiders. Instead, it had everything to do with the onset of Order 66. The 3 years on Mandalore were all but perfect. Anakin and Zena got closer, but not fully developing into something more than what they'd already been. Very flirty with a flare of excitement. Obi-Wan and Satine got married, and he became the consort Duke of Mandalore, Obi-Wan Kenobi Kryze. It's how the names worked here on Mandalore, and marrying into royalty didn't grant the full title. That was reserved for the family and the heir to the throne, if they had one. For the resurgence of Darth Maul, he was found on Florum and attacked by a band of Jedi, Mace Windu and Adi Gallia. Master Gallia was killed by Savage, but Windu made a fool of both Maul and his brother. They were beaten, and upon their retreat they were mortally wounded by Hondo's pirates. Their duel with Windu forced them to lose key limbs, and they were simply defenseless against the pirates when they fought back. The Mandalorians of the Old, on the other hand, had vanished, especially after the deaths of Bo-Katan and Gar Saxon. When Obi-Wan and Anakin were in the cave, they felt the terrible loss of the Order that ripped apart the Jedi. It forced both of them to respectively feel this terrible fear, and the fear made the spiders lock onto them. Anakin and his master, at both ends of the caves without each other, would not resort to violence. They would selectively choose to slow their heart rate down, find peace in the chaos, and then exit the cave. When they exited, they found Zena on her knees, with her hands covering her face. She was crying. Both of them ran over to her, and she said that she didn't know what happened. Everything was fine, and she and Bendu were talking, and then all of a sudden she felt a terrible pain in her chest, as if 1,000 voices cried out for help. While Sidious would have loved a new apprentice in Vader, he didn't need him. He was an asset, just like Dooku, Maul, the clones, the CIS, and the Republic. He could be replaced, and while there was no one like Skywalker in the galaxy, that role could be filled by anybody else, especially with Dooku's death at the hands of Sidious after he learned about the undermining factor. Skywalker and Kenobi comforted Zena, and told her that it was time to go. Bendu told them to resist what they cannot prepare for. This was something that sat on their minds the entire way from Atalon back to Mandalore. Upon the return, they found a horrified Satine. She said that the Republic had been replaced by an empire, and the Emperor was Palpatine. Anakin and Obi-Wan watched a hollow recording, and they both realized that perhaps there was more to Palpatine than they initially realized, though they didn't know if they should go or not. The message the Bendu gave them left them with anxiety towards the entire thing. If they went, then perhaps they'd be sacrificing more than they would initially like to. Skywalker asked Obi-Wan what the Jedi said he was, and Kenobi reminded him that the Jedi believed he was the chosen one. Anakin sighed, and he told his master that if he was, then they should probably go. They should go together, though, and fight the Sith Lord. Obi-Wan agreed, but told Anakin they should take the ship from Tatooine, just so they couldn't lead the Empire to Mandalore. Anakin agreed, and so they had one last meal with everyone before they left. They told them they couldn't wait to see them when they came back. Anakin and Obi-Wan piloted all the way out to Coruscant and landed on the Republic Executive Building. Of course, they didn't use landing zones. They found a small hideaway location for the ship to hide in, before using their lightsabers to break in. As they walked through the building, they felt through the Force for any potential Force users. Both of them immediately locked on the Palpatine. He was really strong with the Force. That couldn't make sense. How was that possible? They continued until they arrived at a door and opened it. When they walked in, they were shocked to say the least. They saw Palpatine standing next to a couple of individuals. They wore black robes, and Sidious told them to kill the Jedi. Turns out Sidious got a head start on the Inquisitorius without Skywalker around. 3 former Jedi leapt forward. Initially, Sidious believed that they were just regular Jedi, but as it turns out, they were much more than regular Jedi. They were familiar. Underneath the beard was a face that he hadn't seen for 10 years, and the younger one, that was Skywalker. Sidious was surprised that they had stayed together the entire time. Well, perhaps Skywalker could be turned to the dark side after all, and be turned to his apprentice. Sidious watched Anakin fight. He didn't have real form of combat, he just used combinations of difference forms, which was really weird. It was like he had his own made-up form. Sidious didn't give Obi-Wan any attention, he was just focused on Skywalker. Within a number of moments, the Master and Apprentice were able to cut through the Inquisitors, gathered here, and then turned their attention to the Sith Lord. Obi-Wan stood in front of Anakin, in their staggered positioning. He questioned how Palpatine was the Sith Lord. Sidious smiled with a sarcastic grin, suggesting that it was obvious. He used the Force and launched Kenobi into a bundle of furniture. Skywalker told Sidious that he would pay for what he did. Sidious asked why Anakin was defending the Jedi, and Anakin suggested that killing innocent people wasn't something he supported. Skywalker launched himself forward and Sidious defended himself as quickly as he could. Their lightsabers moved together, but Sidious could tell that Anakin didn't have the ability to go toe-to-toe with him. Anakin was so quick with his attacks that he thought he was unstoppable. Turns out he wasn't. Sidious was taking it easy on him. Once it became obvious that Skywalker wouldn't support his cause, he turned his ease off and attacked with force. Kenobi by this point joined back up with the conflict. They were fighting rigorously, but it was to no avail. Sidious kicked Obi-Wan in the stomach before swiping behind him and cutting across his eyes, completely blinding him. Sidious laughed before electrocuting Obi-Wan and throwing him out the window of the room. Anakin cried out Obi-Wan's name and deignited his lightsaber before running out and leaping over Palpatine's desk and jumping out the window Kenobi had just been flung out through. Skywalker could see bolts of electricity vibrating off of Obi-Wan's robes as he fell in what looked to be a lifeless fashion. Skywalker reached out with the Force as he slid down the side of the building and pulled Obi-Wan to him. Kenobi wasn't dead, thankfully, but he was very badly injured. Skywalker, through some sort of miracle, was able to get Obi-Wan back to the vessel they arrived in and depart for Mandalore. During the trip back, Anakin apologized profusely to Kenobi for having dragged him all the way out here. It was a fool's errand, and he was so sorry for putting Obi-Wan what he was put through. When Obi-Wan's finally regaining some sort of semblance relating to coherence, he told Anakin that it wasn't his fault. There was nothing to apologize for. Obi-Wan said it was his fault. He should have been better of a teacher, not just for Anakin, but for himself. It was a mistake. Hopefully, the Sith wouldn't follow them home. Upon their return, Satine would be so saddened to see that Obi-Wan had lost his sight. Zena was too. She felt terrible for him. Anakin, on the other hand, was pretty much alright. Just shaken about the entire event, but alright. The best, well, not quite the best word, but the best thing that happened to them was Sidious believed they called the Outer Rim home. So the Empire dove into the Outer Rim and left Mandalore alone. Sidious would deal with the Mandalorians and their neutrality soon, but right now he had to play nice for the sake of politics. For a week, Obi-Wan wouldn't be himself. He would be adjusting to the life of the blind, trying to find understanding in this new way of life, which he would find. Satine spent a lot of time with him and so did Zena. They took on their own respective turns, helping him through the hallways and getting situated with a whole new vibe of life. Firstly, he could walk fine. It was just all of his senses weren't back yet. This was due to the shock he got from Sidious, and the lightning fried a couple of his senses he had, and he was still recovering from the burns and such as he began to feel to the Force again. Both he and Anakin realized what the lesson of the Bendu was. Obi-Wan had to face his fears of the darkness and find a light where there was no visible light, while Anakin had to accept the challenge before him and how he could face it without his master by his side for the first time since Naboo. After the entire Coruscant event, Anakin was found in one location every day for most of the day. He left to eat and such, but he was stuck meditating in the garden outside the palace. Zena gave him time, but she would come out and join him in meditation from time to time, just without interrupting him. She wanted to feel what he felt so she could help him as best as she could. Anakin's thoughts ranged from light to dark, but the constant in the middle was her. He couldn't deny that he was thinking of her. How he would have felt if he was in Obi-Wan's position. Being that they were in a joint meditation, he couldn't hide this from her. But she also never addressed it. She wanted him to say it whenever he felt comfortable. Skywalker, after several days of silence, would tell Zena that he wanted to talk to her. She got a little nervous and the two of them knelt in front of each other. Anakin told her that he knew she understood what he went through during that confrontation. She nodded her head. He told her that she had been his best friend for all the years he could remember. He didn't want to lose her, and he always wanted her by his side. He asked her to be his partner, and before he could finish his statement, she launched himself at him. The two of them rolled backwards and lay in each other's arms, looking at each other in the garden. She told him that she thought he'd never ask. She never wanted to force him into an uncomfortable position. He told her that's how he felt when his life flashed before his eyes. He didn't want to wait forever anymore. She told him that forever and ever would be theirs. Later that night, they would enter the palace and see at the table with Satine a couple of individuals. Obi-Wan was seated across from his Duchess as a Duke consort. He wasn't speaking. He actually didn't want to, because seated at the table was Yoda, who was very badly damaged, and Mace Windu. Yoda was at the temple during Order 66. Windu was on the front lines. Yoda was nearly blown up by a rocket. Windu, for the most part, he was doing alright. But they learned of Kenobi becoming the Duke here, something that managed to evade Sidious. Though he didn't really care for Mandalorian weddings, so perhaps his lack of interest in that permitted him to miss out on it. Anakin asked the Jedi what they were doing here, and they said they came looking for assistance, but it seemed Obi Wan wouldn't be able to offer up such assistance due to his condition, but perhaps Anakin would. While Anakin didn't harbor resentment for the Jedi, he was upset at them. First, he's not good enough, then they want to barge into his aunt's home, or at least he liked calling Satine auntie, and then tell him that Kenobi wasn't good enough. It made his skin crawl, but he knew it wasn't worth arguing with. He needed to help them, so that they could destroy Sidious. That's what mattered at the moment. Not the grudges of the past, the future had to be secured. Anakin sat down at the table next to Satine, and Zena took a seat next to him. Anakin told them that he lost a fight before, and he wasn't ready to face Sidious again. Mace told him that they would complete his training. After that, they would destroy Sidious, and then he would never have to see them again. Anakin looked at Satine, who put her hand on Anakin's hand, which was on the table. He balled his hand into a fist, and she reminded him, through a motherly stance, not to do it. What he wanted to say wouldn't be worth it. She wasn't saying deny it, but she was saying don't say whatever insult he wanted to say. Even as much as he wanted to say it, it wasn't worth it. He was owed that much, but the galaxy deserves so much better, and even Satine knew that. Anakin told them that he accepted their deal, and he would complete his training with them. Yoda and Mace turned to each other and told him that they would begin immediately. It wouldn't be easy, but they began. And Anakin for the next couple of months would go through arduous training, and he would put himself through this pain for the galaxy. When the time came, they prepared to leave. Everyone gave their love and said their goodbyes to Anakin as he prepared for his final stand against the Sith. Yoda and Windu knew what they were about to do, and they were supposed to destroy the Sith. Luckily for them, there were more survivors of the Purge than there would have been had Anakin remained in the Order. Without a lightsaber-wielding maniac inside the halls of the temple, and Yoda present, the Jedi were able to evacuate several more members than they would have been permitted otherwise. When the Jedi arrived on Coruscant, they went to the Jedi Temple, instead of going to one of the political buildings. Sidious gathered himself inside the temple to turn it into his own palace. As the Jedi walked through the gates of their fallen temple, they would find the Sith and his guard, and very quickly dismantle them. The benefit of having more survivors of the Purge was the number of Inquisitors that Sidious could recruit. So when Sidious turned around, 12 Inquisitors descended on the Jedi Masters and Anakin. Sidious told them to kill the Jedi. While the loss of the previous 3 was tragic, Sidious found these individuals scavenging around the temple looking for a new home, and now he could give it to them. If they survived, they'd become his new loyal subjects. The newly crowned Inquisitors ran in, most of them still wielding their blue and green lightsabers. Windu, Yoda, and Anakin ignored their weapons and moved in for the counter. Skywalker, with only a few months of training, was able to harness all of his knowledge and direct it towards skill in one of the deadliest lightsaber forms. He was a monster with it, and combined with his own personal form, it made him even scarier of an opponent. The 3 moved in, and Sidious watched as Yoda and Mace languished over killing their former allies. Sidious cackled in the background as the terror ate at them. The slaughter of the former Jedi filled his heart with joy. Skywalker saw what was coming next. Sidious prepared to launch himself across the room at them, but Skywalker used the Force and launched Sidious. The 2 Jedi Masters were obviously shocked by this, but Anakin shrugged his shoulders and smiled, saying to the Jedi, what could have been had they given him a chance? They watched as Anakin sped forward past them. He was essentially telling them that he didn't need them anymore, and so they quickly followed behind him. Sidious rose to his feet, 2 lightsabers ignited, and throwing himself at Skywalker. Anakin ducked backwards, nearly bending his back over his hips and missing a strike made by Sidious, before spinning out around and blocking another strike. The Jedi Grand Master threw himself forward and was thrown to the ground. Mace pulled his blade over at Sidious, and the Sith Lord blocked him in time. Anakin batted at Sidious. His strikes were fierce and powerful. Skywalker pulled back before blasting down again. Sidious was stuck between 2 opponents, who could dispatch of him very easily, but he wasn't finished yet. He threw himself at Skywalker, believing he was the weakest out of the 3. The solo fight had Anakin backpedaling with extreme speeds and trying to hold his own, but he saw this for his betterment. Each step he took backwards was an advantage he seized. Sidious was fierce and strong, but Skywalker was stronger, a former slave, a denied Jedi, and the chosen one. Anakin slipped Palpatine, grabbing his chest and pulling him forward and cutting him into pieces, before kicking him to the ground to make sure he was dead. Both Yoda and Windu looked at Skywalker. He shrugged again and told them to never visit his home again. He extinguished his blade and walked away. The 2 of them were left in some sort of shock, but he was gone, and the Sith were dead. Perhaps it was the best for both worlds. Anakin, upon his return to Mandalore, was ecstatic to see his family again, as they were him. They praised him for his actions, and they got to sit back and watch Coruscant eat itself alive. Because of Satine's work as Duchess of Mandalore throughout the Clone Wars, she was able to take advantage of what happened. Her leadership cultivated the minds of the Neutral Systems Coalition. And while the fall of the Republic and the rise of the Empire was a direct confrontation to the neutral systems, they held their own against the Empire, with Satine as their face. With the Empire in the midst of a civil war, she directed people to rise against the war and chase peace. Her words inspired people and her actions took the forefront of people's minds. Satine didn't want to be a leader of the galaxy, let alone the falling apart Empire, but people who were sick of the conflict chose her as a leader. Satine denied. She wouldn't abandon Mandalore, but she would help those who wanted to bring peace succeed. Senators would come from around the galaxy to Mandalore, where they would have a chance to discuss topics and leave with new mindsets. These debates would go on for nearly years. Obi Wan, who always vowed to never marry a politician, was now quite the politician. He spent so much time with Satine during these excursions that he was able to speak for her when she was unable to. Satine did so many speeches and debates that many days she just became quiet and didn't speak because her voice couldn't. So Obi Wan did what he could to carry the weight for her. It worked beautifully, and he became a face of Mandalore and neutrality alongside of his wife. Also, it didn't help her considering she was having herself a kid. Her daughter, Astrid Kenobi Kryze, who was the rightful heir to the Mandalorian throne, and she would be brought into a galaxy free from the Sith and free from oppression. While they were holding the galaxy together, Anakin and Zena would build off of their foundation and consecrate themselves inside the Mandalorian traditions, being that they called it more of a home to them than they ever did Tatooine. Shmi was so proud of her little family and how far along it came over the years. Anakin and Zena would move away from the palace and find themselves home elsewhere inside of the Sundari Dome, where they would open up a mechanic shop. Zena, despite her early background in the arts, picked up a lot of similar hobbies as Skywalker. Unlike Anakin, who was always as quiet as a loth cat while doing his mechanics, Zena always sung. She hummed harmonies or composed lyrics on the spot, all of them having some sort of whimsical yet beautiful meaning. Anakin preferred to work in silence all of his life. When Anakin and Zena worked in the shops on Tatooine, she was never around Anakin, and he was always stuck listening to whatever edgy Weequay music one of the Grease pirates played. He hated Weequay music, so when they opened their shop, and he heard her singing while they were working, he couldn't help but want to hear it more. Sometimes he would stop what he was doing to listen for a moment. Every time he heard her sing, it was like butterflies filling his body. What a way of life. At some point after their small relocation, they'd have a boy, and he'd be named Jin Skywalker. Anakin thought the name would be fitting, because if it wasn't for Qui-Gon Jinn, he would have never been here with Obi-Wan. Zena, while having heard all the stories Obi-Wan told, thought the name was just cute. It was a perfect life. Not every day was perfect, but it felt like it was. When you love the people around you like they did, there was no day that didn't feel complete. And as Anakin and Obi-Wan learned, despite their challenges and their difficulties, it would always be okay in the end. And it was. And that, my friends, is our story. Again, special thanks to Galva Gaming, Tristan, Darth Revan, Pimp Daddy Bane, The Last Jedi, Apollo, Weeboo670, Rai700, Darth Nox, The Eternal Padawan, Jedi Sloth, Mr. Yeet Gamer, Lord Calig, Youngling Slayer 66, Mad Many Studios, Anakin003, Fordo's Legacy Star Wars, Lemon Knight, Rex the Wolf, the man with 3 first names, Dark Saint 46, Johnny Nguyen, Baron Joshua, and Lord Deadwing for supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, smash the like button. Want to support in other ways or see that Let's Get Longer, check out the Patreon. Sith Clone Wars or the Sith Empire Return is there. It's on the screen. Anyways, wow. That's quite beautiful, if I don't say so myself. I really hope you all enjoyed this video. I wanted the heart of the story to be Obi-Wan and Anakin. I think Obi-Wan is a great teacher. I think he's a terrific teacher. I think he's a great dude, actually. And I think what held him back was just Anakin being in the Jedi Order. He didn't get to be himself, and I think that's what held Anakin back. I don't think it was the Jedi necessarily. I think it was just being in the Order is what held him back. And I think Obi-Wan, being a fine teacher, would be a great teacher for Anakin. Obviously, it would take a lot for him to just leave the Order, but that's the whole point of the video, is him leaving the Order and coming to terms with it. And I really hope you enjoyed this video. I put my heart into it, as I do every story, but this one's going to be in the top 10. Anyways, I love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.